we'll get going. You can go ahead and start it. Okay, it's a couple minutes after 7. We're going to go ahead and start. If people are going to join us a minute or two late, that's fine. We'll allow them in. But we have to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you for taking the time to join us. This is certainly not any way we've done it in the past. Normally we've had in-person meetings and public opportunities to come and learn more in person. But due to COVID, we've had to think outside the box. And so, you know, we've given people the opportunity to join via Zoom, Facebook Live, or our YouTube channel. So hoping for a good turnout over the 3 public meeting dates that we have set. Mailings were done, so all resident taxpayers should have gotten information about the election, and then notice of election, and then you know, polling place information, where to vote, whether in person or absentee. So my name is Chris Fensky. I'm superintendent for the school district. We have a panel of experts with us, our school consultants. So Preston Early from R.A. Morton, they're our construction management consultants. Preston is on the call with us, and he'll take us through some slides later. Greg Crow from Ehlers Financial is on with us, and he'll be taking us through the financial piece of it. And then Dan Goldman from Wendell Architects is also on with us.
This is Jim. I'm here too.
Okay, and Jim. Okay, Jim joined us too.
I had a cancellation, so I'm able to.
Okay, good. So we have two representatives from Wendell Architects, and there will be an opportunity for questions. And so the two platforms we'll have for questions will be in Zoom. Everyone in the Zoom platform has the opportunity to unmute yourself, and then you can ask a question that way during question time. And then if you're on Facebook Live, you can submit your question over Facebook Live, and then Mr. Lallam is our moderator, and he will get me that question. So some of our consultants do have other school district meetings tonight, beginning about 8 o'clock. And so we'll try to be efficient as possible. We've also created a frequently asked questions document of the different questions that have been asked since the mailings have gone out. That document will be continued to be updated, and that's posted on our website. So if you haven't had a chance to visit that yet, there's great resources on the website as well. So so what I'm going to do is I'll kind of take us through the process, and then the work that was done in that process, and then Preston and Jim and Dan can talk about the proposed projects and options within the 2 questions, and then Greg can talk about the financial piece of it, and then I'll touch just a recap of the different the voting information that pertains to everybody for February 9th, and then there'll be some Q&A time at the end. So once again, thanks for joining us. So basically, kind of a recap how we got here. The district on the Board of Education has a subcommittee of the board called the Building and Grounds Committee. There are 3 board members out of the 7 that serve on this committee, and they meet anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year. But part of the annual requirements by the Minnesota Department of Education is that we have a long-term facility maintenance revenue and expenditure program with the state. And so this committee is responsible for annually reviewing and updating their 10-year facilities plan. Over the course of those meetings, one of the things we've been keeping an eye on has been water infiltration through our roof in the 2002 portion of the building. Over the past couple of years, they've become very numerous, and we found ourselves expending more and more general fund dollars to repair, patch, fix HVAC units and that type of thing. Upon inspection of our roof by a company called Garland this spring, it was to the point where we needed to take action rather than wait. The ideal plan was to probably try to wait for about 4 years until the existing debt expired. But with the numerous leaks and the fact that the water infiltration has not created a mold issue in the insulation deck, became to the point where we need to be proactive and try to do something before something with mold would happen, which would create an even larger expense in the main part of the building. So the board at that time decided to get a facilities analysis study completed. And we worked with Preston, who has worked with the district in the past. And he did a facilities analysis, inside and outside in the spring of 2020. And that was completed in May. At that time, the board wanted to once again use a similar process that we've used in the past, and that was a community facilities task force, trying to get members of the community from different aspects of agriculture, parents, non-parents, business representatives, and just try to get a broad spectrum of people to build that capacity for providing input. So this committee met in the fall and went through the facilities analysis that was done by R.A. Morton. And obviously, given the impact of COVID and the inability to have public gatherings and things like that, they recommended trying a new process, and that was getting public input done via survey. And so after doing some research of different school consulting groups, we felt it important to use a third-party vendor and not to have maybe a bias of district running its own survey, that type of thing. And so several districts in our Southwest Minnesota area have used the company School Perceptions out of Slinger, Wisconsin. And they ran the survey, which went to people's mailboxes on September 14th. And then the survey was through October 5th, 2020. The object with the survey was to throw out some ideas of what we were looking at, and then get some background data of what people thought of the district, from education to how we spent tax dollars to things like that. And then School Perceptions then uses the data from the survey to make recommendations. Then the Board of Education took the results and the recommendations from the Facilities Task Force and School Perceptions on November 9th and approved a submission to the Minnesota Department of Education for review and comment of the potential projects. The board passed a resolution on November 23rd for a two-question ballot bond referendum. The final comment from the Minnesota Department of Education was a positive review. The board discussed this at their January 11th meeting. And then all the reports and materials are published and have been on our website under the facilities section. Mrs. Karen Miners has done a great job of keeping that up to date. And then we're having public meetings over Zoom, Facebook Live, and our live stream YouTube channel, obviously tonight, and then also again Sunday night, and then next Wednesday. And then the election date is Tuesday, February 9th. And then we're just encouraging a good voter turnout. So encouraging people to get out and vote. So we had a very good response to the community survey done by School Perceptions. This was done either electronically or it could have been done in a paper form. School Perceptions, like I said, is a third-party vendor used by school districts, not only in our area, but throughout the state and surrounding states. But they've conducted over 10,000 community surveys for schools. So as I was saying earlier, the survey was conducted in mid-September through early October. Residents within the Lakeview School District were mailed a survey, and then each survey included an access code so they could do it online, and it also protected the validity of the data. So we received 381 total responses, which statistically speaking is a very great participation rate. Almost double what they see normally. And then the statistics have a plus minus margin of error of about 5%. This is the feedback we got back where people resided in our district. Notice we do have some people that responded that don't live in the survey, but that data was removed from the computations done that I'll show on the following slides. This slide just gives a little background of the perceptions. And so on the far right column, typically what School Perceptions is not ignore, but typically they go by the non-parents, non-staff column. And if that's around 3 or higher, you're doing really, really well. And even the 2.84 for people not involved in your school in terms of working there or having students in the district really says a lot for not only the school district, but the communities as a whole. And this is also very good data to get back as a school district. Overall satisfaction between satisfied and very satisfied is at 94%, which is almost incredible. The company had commented that they had not seen usually data over 80%, and we're at 94% of people that ranked us very high and people that responded. So in this survey, we presented kind of the base plan. If you want to think of kind of the meat and potatoes of kind of what drove everything. I mentioned the water infiltration and the roof. Those are the driving factors. So obviously that becomes the main part of the base plan. And so these were some of the projects we put in that survey and then the associated costs with those to see what people thought of those ideas and if they'd be supportive or not. Oops. So going back to the base plan, which at the time was a little over 7 million, 63% ranked that very highly for support, which was a very good sign. Only 15% of people felt that they would vote no on that. And typically that's around 25% in a normal survey. And then the 22% undecided, typically those people just want more information about everything. And then some of those will obviously become yes, some will become no, and then some may not even vote. Some of the additional projects that we listed forward there. Again, looking at the non-parent, resident, non-staff. Typically, this is only a Likert scale of 3. And so what the consultants suggested was anything in about this 1.8 or higher, felt that they told the task force you could probably move those expenditures to question 1, and felt that dollar values were minimal enough where they would still support that base plan. And then anything kind of below that 1.8, they recommended as running that as a separate question. And so that's really where the 2 questions came from. So the overall projects potential is a little under 11 million. And then in that survey, we asked, how would you support that? And, that alone was right around 50% were yes, or definitely yes. Again, 25% were a no, or definitely no. But that middle part, that 30%, again, a lot of people wanting more information. So what that told us, the data tells us, is that, again, the strong need for probably a 2-question ballot and not running everything together. So this is what I was getting at about trying to have a transparent process, getting community input the best we could given the COVID situation. Because even though, we've been in the pandemic at Lakeview, we've been having our kids back in school. Obviously in the spring statewide, we were out, but having facilities needs and needs repairs and things like that, those issues do not go away, even though you're in distance learning. So really what the conclusion was the base plan had very strong support based on the data we got back from the residents of about 64%. And again, about that 22% area wanted some more information. So we feel good about those projects in there. And then the additional projects, like I was mentioning, the stronger support was shown for like the auditorium improvements, the fire doors, the windows for better energy efficiencies. And so those things are moved to question 1. And then question 2, the activity spaces and things like that, we left on question 2. Okay, at this time, Preston, I'll turn it over to you, and then you can kind of walk us through, between you and Jim and Dan can take us through some of the projects.
All right, thanks, Chris. The slide that is on the screen now is an overview of the project in the 2 questions as were identified in the previous slides. From the facilities analysis, we took those line items in detail and assigned project costs to those. And then with that, then the priority that the school board looked at established the 2-question concept. We segmented them into major categories as you see on the screen. The first question, the first item there is the HVAC and plumbing upgrades. The total of that type of project or scope of project is $2 million. The security and the communication upgrades is just under $300,000. Replacing the roofs, another one of the larger categories at $1.66 million. To caulk the joints, the precast joints, and some of the siding repairs at about $300,000. A variety of maintenance updates throughout the building at $970,000. Site improvements and parking lots and playgrounds, that would be, and we'll walk you through some of these slides in a little bit to identify what these are, but that was about $646,000. The associated fees and permits and testings at $877,000. We also established contingencies in here for unknowns as the planning process proceeds and or as construction continues, labeled that at $591,000. And then we applied an escalation or inflation factor. The cost prices that we had putting this together were based on current pricing, which was back last summer. And with this project being potentially approved in early 2021, there is that lag time where some inflation factor was considered. At the bottom of the page is the other costs or the finance costs. Those totaled $303,000. So the first question bond amount was $7,865,000. In question 2, and again, we'll explain these a little bit more in detail in the further slides. The outdoor activity fields at $2.2 million, the fees, contingencies, escalation, and finance costs total of $2,950,000 for question number 2. Now we'd like to walk you through some of the more specifics of each one of these in the budget. A big portion of what we looked at here was the quality or the life expectancy of your existing roofs. And as you see from the chart and the graphic, that we identified each of these different segments of the roof areas. And as this building is in 2 different phases, we looked at the 2002 construction and then the 2015 construction. And really, this is just focusing on the 2002. The roof itself was leaking in various locations, has been maintained, but is at its end of its life cycle. And at this point, it's been reported no mold has accumulated in the insulation underneath the roofing product, but it's time to replace the roofing before we start seeing some of that. Maybe Chris, you want to go to the next slide? A little bit more detail of what the project scope or what roof replacement areas are. The next slide represents some of the graphics and how we understand and know that the roof is also at the end of its life cycle. As you can see, most of the roofing is covered by rock or ballast, and we would be looking at a slightly different roofing type of material, still a rubber material, but without the rocks. But the arrows represent areas where, which is typical at the end of a life cycle of a roof, where the rubber starts stretching and pulling away from the edges. And that's why you see the slanted portion at the edges of the roofing. And so along with the leaking spots, a telltale sign that we're at the end of a life cycle of a roof. The next slide represents the rooftop replacements that we are planned for the project. The lifespan for these types of rooftop units that were installed is around 20 years, so we're right at that point. And there are 35 various rooftop units that we look to replace. The combination of the end of the life cycle and the need for continual repairs and parts that are becoming harder to get, we determined it was a good time to put these onto the priority list for replacement. This graphic shows just the various locations of the rooftop units. The red items are the ones that are being replaced. There is one that shows in blue there, and that actually was updated in the 2015 project, so that one was not addressed at this time. Also looked at the shape of the parking lot, and I'm sure if you've been in the parking lots over the last year or so, you've noticed a lot of what this picture does represent. Even though the district has worked on seal coating and maintenance, with the amount of cracking and the shape of the parking lot, we feel that it is time to do an overlay for the parking lot. And so we would be doing the portion of the parking lot that is within the original 2002 construction, or as shown in the shaded gray. The balance of the parking lot was added onto in the 2015 project, so we will not be addressing that. Also was reported by facilities maintenance that the freezer and cooler for the kitchen area has had many maintenance issues. And so we looked at those items as being replaced at this point too, rather than continuing to spend the money to repair those items. This, as I mentioned earlier, the building is a precast structural system, and in each of those panels are sealed by caulk joints between each one of them. And as you can see from the picture, is that those caulk joints are starting to come apart and allow water to infill between. And so we would be removing the caulking, installing new backers and sealants, and then to prevent any future water infiltration. This isn't the best picture, I apologize for that, but it shows the condition of some of the VCT flooring or vinyl composite tile flooring that are in the hallways and the classrooms throughout the building. And again, 20 years of wear on the systems, we looked at replacement as the best option for those flooring systems. Also looked at the door access and conditions of the doors, including the components of fire alarm systems, and identified a number of doors within the facility that we would do some upgrades to keep the fire alarm system active and operating as it should, and then also normal maintenance and wear and tear on the facility doors. In question one, some of the other safety and security items that don't show up as a picture graphic, but the original public address system, intercom system, is original to the 2002 building. As a technology item, things have changed fairly dramatically in the last 20 years, and the current system is hard to hear in several locations, and especially with any kind of event that you would have an emergency system, we felt it was good at this time to replace the intercom system, as well as update the camera and DVR system. Also identified by the district was to update the bus camera and stop arm on the current buses. And so that will be also part of the project as we looked at it. Some of the code upgrades that were identified is the locker room areas. Right now, your locker rooms have more multi-function, multi-head common shower fixtures, and current code would require each of those individual shower stalls to comply with current code. So we are looking at renovating the locker room shower areas into individual shower stalls. At the auditorium, we would replace the current stage curtain to meet current fire code. And along with the freezer and cooler in the kitchen, we would replace the current flooring system with a new and updated approved flooring surface in the kitchen area. Just so I don't monopolize all of the time, if Jim or Dan would like to jump in and talk about this graphic.
This is basically just the graphic of the items Preston just described. The reddish areas are the areas where we would be looking at flooring replacement. So the primarily the hallways and classrooms of the majority of the 2002 project. The auditorium in the orange, that would be carpet replacement. The blue over on the right edge is the shower, just shows where the shower replacement is, or shower upgrades that Preston discussed. The green area where the kitchen is would be the cooler and freezer upgrades, and you can, it's a little bit hard to see, but the purple circled areas or would be where we've got the fire separation doors or cross corridor doors that are on hold opens, that we would be replacing the doors and hardware there. So these are kind of the general construction scope items, and you can see, on top there's just some bullet points that cover some of the other areas, but primarily areas that Preston mentioned. I think the one not sure if you mentioned it or if there was a slide on it, but the windows would also be replaced for the building. This is primarily all the question 2 work relating to the site. The biggest pieces of this would be the upgrade of the football or multi-sport field that would be within where the football field is now. So this would be configured with turf and be able to be used for variety of sports. And then the track would be resurfaced at the southeast corner. The existing softball field then would be converted to another baseball field. And then a few of the other items included would be additional lighting for the softball and baseball field, some playground upgrades, and some upgrades to the press box, scoreboards, and concession building.
Preston and Jim, maybe touch on, some of the questions we're getting, like with the changeover from like grass to a turf field. Talk about the trend in school districts doing that you see of the different districts you're working with.
Yeah, we're seeing that in, whenever kind of a significant upgrade is done, that's usually one of the ones. The biggest issue there is a lot of it with a grass field, and to try to keep that into playing condition during a season. A lot of districts don't allow any practices on the field at all, just because to keep it in playing condition for football games. So by putting in turf, it not only allows it to be used for practices, but really for daytime use for physical education. And then we can also fit a softball field within that space, so that allows us to use it for to basically use that for the softball field to allow expansion for another baseball field. So
it also expands the use time of the
right.
surface itself too. In the spring, when it is wet, in a normal grass environment, it takes a period of time for it to dry out, where the turf field, as soon as the elements of snow or whatever are off, you can utilize it. So it does expand the life use of it as well, or the seasonal use.
Really, some of the things, that we've heard over time, school districts are a little different than your cities and counties in that we don't set our own levies and things like that. So every time we have projects like this, we need to go to the public, to get approval. When the athletic facilities first opened here, things have changed quite drastically in terms of what the school's expected to do and who uses our facilities. It's, if you look at baseball now, it's used all the way from T-ball through adult or town team ball. The community ed programming has expanded in terms of soccer. Phy-ed programming has expanded in the school districts now, with preschool through 12th grade Phy-ed, and adding lifetime type exercise classes. So some of the things we've calculated, our football field at Lakeview is probably used on average around 600 hours a year. So really, you're talking a large amount of space that was basically dormant space. And in looking at some of our calculations now, we figure we could almost take that times 5 with a multi surface. such as turf, and use it about 3,000 hours per year through not only elementary football through high school football, but having softball on there, PE classes and elementary recess as a green space, youth programs I mentioned, and baseball practice, which also frees up some gym time in the spring for like JO volleyball and some of the other groups that use our school building. So really question 2 is almost visioning forward. It's almost a 20-year visioning forward plan for our activity spaces, because school, we do not want to be on the ballot every year running little projects. So when we do go to the public for a vote, we like to have our ducks in a row and explain what we're thinking and what we view our needs are. And then over time, we've had requests of looking at getting lights and upgrading scoreboards, and then our press box and concession areas. One of the things our district's taken pride in has been our ability to live stream events. That's a free service, and that takes equipment. And so, when you look at what goes into a typical press box at a track meet or a football game, you have event workers, you have coaches, you have game personnel, and now we also have live stream equipment. It's a high dollar equipment we want to protect, and so that's why you need to look at making those spaces a little bit bigger. And the same is true with the concessions building. So those are just some of the comments on questions that people have asked about question 2.
Hey, Chris, this is Scott Hansen here, Principal 712. One of the things that we're doing is we're making phone calls to the public right now. We had our first group of phone calls we made last Monday. And kind of the sense that we got is, the first question on the ballot, very much support for. Question 2 on the ballot, had a lot of conversations with some people. I actually had another phone call with a community member this morning, and they said that the turf field is this hang up, and I think to really put in perspective, like what you said, Chris, is that the hours that facility, the football field, is used right now, it's used about 12 to 16 times a year, and it's really only used in the fall and all summer long, and there's really nothing that takes place out there. Now, if you envision over the next 20 years, how many activities that can be held by using an all-purpose facility, from youth soccer to youth baseball, all those community education programs, and really promoting our youth activities is going to be outstanding. And it's one of those things is that you want your school to be on the cutting edge of new technology and on the cutting edge of making the best improvements possible to really let your community know how important the communities are that we serve in this school district. So, some of the questions about the turf where, well, kids are going to need 2 different types of shoes and they're going to need all these other things and injuries. And to be honest with you, the synthetic turf of today is actually safer and better than most grass football fields. And like for some of the statistics on injuries, this is from Field Turf. It's a company that does research and builds turf fields. There's 40% fewer concussion injuries on turf. There's 43% fewer ACL injuries on field turf. 25% lost time to injury on field turf. So there's lots of data out there. There's lots of research out there that that this is what's happening to school districts in the future. Is that they're making these improvements, so why not Lakeview?
Yep, thank you. I guess the final thing I'd add, and then we'll get moving on to the financial piece, but the needing to redo the track from the base up, as that's nearing the end of its lifespan, kind of gives you the idea that if you're going to do something with your football surface, that would be the time to do it, where that track and that football field are done concurrently. And that also, again, gives you cost efficiency. It wouldn't be where you would do the track, say this year, and then you come back 4 years later and then decide to do the football field. that wouldn't be a very good use of resources either. So we really got to the discussion point that if you're going to look at doing something, you look at the whole versus the two parts of it. Is that accurate, Preston?
Yes.
Okay, and then I'll turn it over to Greg, and Greg can take us through the tax impact and finance information.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for everyone for being here tonight. We've got a few slides that give you a little background on property taxes as they relate to voter-approved bonds and the tax impact as well, and how we're structuring the debt to help the district manage the tax impact over time with its existing bond payments, if you think of those like mortgage payments, and ones that would be used to pay off this bond. We do make a note on this slide that school districts levy on a couple of different tax bases, and they don't get to choose which property tax levies get to apply to each tax base. So for a school building bond, that is levied on net tax capacity versus another tax base, which you may have heard of, called referendum market value, which when there's a voter approved operating referendum is used as a tax base, and it excludes cabins and farmland. So in this case, this levy would be spread across all property taxpayers in the school district. And the next slide shows how that's broken out. And we highlight the qualifying agricultural row because that's such a significant part of the Lakeview School District property tax base. So the final two columns are the net tax capacity that I referenced. And you can see on there that 71% of the tax base is qualifying agricultural land. So if you think of that mortgage payment again, that annual debt service levy that the school district makes to pay the payments on its debt, those last percentages are the shares that are paid by those different property types. So residential homesteads will pay about 11% of the annual payment, and qualifying agricultural would pay about 71%. But it's important that we highlight that one, and you remember that because there is a state program that offsets the tax impact to agricultural landowners. So kind of keep that 71% in mind as we move forward. This is a detailed amortization table of principal and interest payments, and it's not really super important that you get into the details, but we want to point out some of the assumptions that go into structuring the debt for a school district. It doesn't have to be level principal and interest like you might see on your mortgage. In fact, we can use the district's existing payments and schedule the new payments around those in a way that helps with the tax impact and try to keep them predictable over time. So for question one, as we've noted before, the total principal amount in the green circle is a little less than $7.9 million. In the yellow circle, we note that interest rate we're assuming is 2.75%. We ran these estimates in October in anticipation, of course, of a February election and then a bond sale sometime in March or April. And actually right now, interest rates are quite a bit lower than that 2.75%. So if and when the bonds are sold after the election, if that percentage is lower, that will result in lower taxes paid over time on the bonds because the interest payments will be lower. The other thing we notice in the blue circle, which is that we're not assuming significant amount of growth in the total tax base of the school district. You can see it's been pretty level. We're assuming that it'll be pretty level going forward. So the next slide is a picture of what the debt service payments look like for the school district right now and what they would look like if question one passes. The blue bars represent the tax rate for the debt service payments, those mortgage payments, that the school district pays right now on its existing outstanding bonds. And you can see that through 2025, those payments, the tax rate on them is about 17%. And then in 2026, that's the year the taxes are payable, that drops down, and that's the second bond that was passed and had some lower payments going forward in the last 9 or 10 years or so of that 20-year bond. So what we would do with this new bond, which would be 20 years as well, is there would be 4 initial interest-only payments And then the principal and interest would increase starting in 2026. And then when the old bonds are fully paid off in 2034, there would be a full regular level payments. So for a taxpayer, that green arrow above the 2021 year really shows how the levy is increasing. If you vote yes on question 1, between the taxes you're paying this year and the taxes you would pay next year. But the other important piece of it is the big arrow that goes down and going into 2026. So while there would be an increase in taxes for 4 years, after the one portion of the existing debt is paid off, there'll still be a step down. It won't be as large as it is on the blue bars, but it still will be a decrease in taxes between 25 and 26, even to a point that's lower than what you're paying right now in 2021. So that's an important part of the structure. And as you look at the tax impact, it's important to note that that's not a 20-year tax impact, because it does come down after those debts get paid off. And we can show the same thing with question 2, which is on the next 2 slides. The first one is the same information, but showing at the higher bond amount of $10.8 million. So you look in that chart on the next slide and you see the arrow going up in 2021 is slightly larger, and the arrow going down in 2026 is slightly smaller, but there is still a reduction in taxes after that first 4 years. And that reduction results in a tax rate that's actually lower than what folks are paying now in 2021 and what they would be paying in 2025, even if the bond didn't pass. So even with both questions passing, it's really just a 4-year increase compared to what is being paid now. So the next 2 slides actually calculate that tax impact on an annual basis for a variety of types of property and values of properties. So you can see, for example, on this slide, on a $100,000 home, the tax impact of question 1 is slightly under $2 per month. And question 2 is actually under $1 a month, about 75 cents a month. So the total tax impact of questions 1 and 2 for someone with a $100,000 home is about $2.50 per month, about $30 annually. And we've got some examples for businesses. And this information is also available on the school district's website. We've created a tax calculator where you can see this table, but you can also enter in your value for a home or a business, and it will give you a specific estimate for your estimated market value. So if your home is worth $163,000, you can go ahead and enter that into the tax calculator, and it'll show you what the estimated annual and monthly tax impact is for each of these questions and the total amount. So the next page of tax impact relates to agricultural property, and basically is laid out in the same way, question 1, question 2, and the total. So you can see on a $6,000 acre, question 1 is about 3 cents per acre per month. Question 2, about 1 cent per acre per month, for a total of about 4 cents per acre per month. So for agricultural properties, because the classification system is a little different, on the website, we've got a form you can fill in with your name, your email, your address, and your phone number, and your parcel numbers, and we'll run a customized property tax estimate for each of your parcels and all of your parcels in total. I should also note that this property tax impact that's shown on this page does incorporate what I mentioned, which is the agricultural school bond tax credit. We've got some more information about that in detail on the next page. Basically, what the school building bond ag credit is a tax credit for property owners, agricultural property owners, that is connected directly to school district debt service. And it started increasing with taxes payable in 2018. And it applies to all existing school district debt and any new bonds that are approved by the voters. It applies to all of your agricultural land except the house, garage, and 1 acre. And while most of your land will be class rate 2A, which is tillable land, it also does apply to 2B properties, which are rural vacant land, like hunting land that's not used for production, or managed forest land, which you probably don't have much, if any, of in your school district. The credit was 40% in prior to 2020, and it was increased to 50% in 2020, and then it's for 2021. This year it's 55%, and then it's slated to increase to, actually that's a typo, it should say 60% for taxes payable in 2022 and 70% for taxes payable in 2023. And again, that applies to all existing and outstanding debt. It's an ongoing credit, so it's automatically deducted from your tax bill. You don't have to apply for a refund, or you don't need to complete any forms. It just gets reduced before you pay your bill. It's also paid by the state, so it's important to note that it's not a shift to other property tax owners. So the amount that's not being paid by agricultural landowners doesn't get shifted over to homeowners, for example. So then on the next slide, this is just an example of a tax statement. So as I mentioned, that tax credit comes off above the line, so that when you actually get to what is the amount I owe, it's net of the tax, a net of that ag to school tax credit. So big picture, this is extremely important for your district because of that 71% agricultural property ownership that I mentioned early on when I started with the finance slides. Basically, when you get to that 70% ag credit level in 2023, you're at a tax credit rate of about 50% from the state. In other words, for every, pick a number, $1 million that's paid in debt service, if the mortgage payment for the school district is $1 million, the state will send the school district $500,000 to offset those agricultural property taxes. So over the life of the bond, the state is going to end up paying for half of whatever project costs or whatever bond issuance that the voters approved. And then there's a couple of other pie pieces, commercial and residential and other taxpayers will pay about a quarter, a little over a quarter, and then the ag land that doesn't qualify for the credit or after the credit, as well as buildings, would pay about 22%, so a little under a quarter. So really, it's an important message for everyone to understand, especially if you go back to when the last couple of bond elections were held and there wasn't a credit in place. There's a significant participation by the state at this point, thanks to that agricultural ag to school property tax credit. The next slide kind of shows how that evolved over time and what would happen with the new bond for an example agricultural property owner. So this was assuming a $7,000 valuation on a homesteaded agricultural acre, both questions passing in a 20-year bond. You can see and on the second to the far right column, for taxes payable 2022, we're estimating that on existing debt, that farmer would pay $2.45 an acre for that tax. If both questions are passed, that would add about 59 cents per acre of property taxes. So that total, about just over $3 per acre, is actually, if you go back to pay 2017, just on the school district's existing debt is about half of what farmers are paying at that time. And you can see that credit on that over time on that acre has significantly reduced the tax being paid on that acre. And so that at the point in pay 23, even with the new bond, an agricultural landowner will be paying less per acre by about 42 cents than what they're paying this year on those property taxes for that acre. So that ag credit cannot be understated, the importance of it to your school district and the advantage of you approving investments in your facilities and taking advantage of the support the state offers. For other taxpayers, we've got a couple slides of general information about property tax refunds and deferrals. There are two main refund programs and one deferral program, and they can reduce your tax burden. But they do require a form, and we've got the link on the form, so you can look it up or you can talk to a tax professional. On the next slide, we summarize the three programs. One is the homestead credit refund, which is on a sliding scale, and it applies to all homestead property, including residential homestead and ag homestead, the house, garage, and 1 acre. It's a sliding scale based on total property taxes and income. So if you have high property taxes and low income, you can end up at the higher end of the scale, where the maximum refund is $2,800 for homeowners and $2,200 for renters. And that's relative to all of your taxes, not just your school taxes. That's the same for the next program, the special property tax refund. That one kicks in if your property taxes increase from 1 year to the next. And it's not income based, but it is based on the change in property taxes. And then lastly, the deferral I mentioned is a senior citizen tax deferral that allows you, if you're over age 65 with a household income of $60,000 or less, to defer some of your property taxes on your home. And I think that takes us to the last slide. So if you see me in the grocery store with my mask on, feel free to ask me any questions about taxes and finance.
All right, thank you, Greg. And just again, the election information. So Tuesday, February 9th, and this is all again sent to all resident taxpayers in our district. But the polls are open from 12 noon to 8 p.m. on Tuesday. And then precinct 1 is the Cottonwood Community Center. And that's the townships listed there. And then precinct 2 is the Wood Lake Community Center. So the previous precincts as used in the past. And then obviously with the COVID situation, absentee voting has become more popular probably now than ever. But Yellow Medicine County is handling that, their Property and Public Services Division. And you can request the form, you can submit it electronically, and then they'll mail you a ballot with all the postage paid. And then they're even open the Saturday prior to the election, so you could even vote absentee at the Yellow Medicine County Public and Property Services Division in Granite Falls. So they're the voting options there. And now I know Preston's got to cut out for another meeting to another school district. I guess question, comments, those types of things. We could take maybe Facebook Live first. Do we have anything?
I have one.
Okay.
So a question from Phil Dahl, wondering about the bus arms.
Okay.
The cameras. I want to get the exact question. Why does the district have to pay for the inside and outside cameras on buses when we contract the service?
Okay.
And then a 2-part, and then so we know it's with the student privacy. How does that affect offenders that violate the stop arm violation?
There's a question on the bus arm cameras. So the district right now owns all the cameras. Even though we contract for bus services, it's a common practice that the school district owns its camera equipment. That is basically data privacy rights, because they're still our students. And so the district really owns that footage. And so if there is an issue with students or things like that where the district needs to investigate that, we have the property rights to that equipment. And then when the bus fleet, when they buy and sell buses, the camera, we still own that equipment. So it goes on the buses that would come in. And in regards to the offenses, typically on the violations, those are reported in by the bus drivers. And then the bus arm cameras actually would have that video evidence of, an offender. So we have worked with Yellow Medicine County and Lyon County Sheriff's Office with, not only violations with bus arms, but going around stop signs and those types of things. So the school district does work with law enforcement on those issues.
Chris, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of this meeting tonight. And if any questions do come up after I leave the meeting, please contact me and we'll work on getting the answers.
Yep.
And I also am stepping out, same meeting as Preston, but I think Dan is able to stay on for a few minutes if there are any other questions for us.
How about in our Zoom world here? Everyone should have the ability to unmute their mic and ask a question if you have one.
Say, Chris, this is Corey. I have
Hi,
a
Corey.
question.
Yes.
Hey, I've been asked to, how long does the turf field last? And then what would it cost for like replacement or something down the road?
Sure. So typically, Corey, the research, typically about 15 years to 20 years in that area. It depends on how well you maintain things like that. And then typically the maintenance on that's about $5 a square foot. The most expensive part of the turf is the base and all the sub work that goes into it. And then typically how districts handle that is they handle that with like an ongoing maintenance, like through that long-term facility maintenance program that I talked about. So it'd be similar to like flooring in your school building, things like that would become part of your annual maintenance type projects.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
There was one, but then it was answered within the meeting.
Okay. Any other questions? Facebook Live, we had one question that just got answered earlier. So, and then the other question. Anything else from Zoom participants? Okay. If you think of something, feel free to email me. My contact information is on our website. We have a facility section on our website. And again, I'll direct you to the frequently asked questions document. And maybe, kind of the one question I probably got the most is, dealing with the funding. So the district runs a bond, kind of what Greg was saying, similar to a mortgage payment. So right now, when we're doing those repairs and things like that with the roof units and any maintenance type items, those are coming from our general fund. So that's the dollars, we budget and allocate for our kindergarten through 12th grade programming. And so when you have increased expenses in those areas, then you have less dollars to allocate for your K-12 programming. So that's really why the district is looking at a bond, because once you get, if you're fortunate enough to pass your bond, then you have those dollars from the bond sale, and then you're making your payments out of your debt service fund, which then frees up your general fund dollars. So, the other thing I'd point out, Lakeview is one of the few districts in the state that does not have a voter approved operating levy. Beyond the state approved formulas and levies, the average voter operating levy in the state of Minnesota is $846 on top of what's allowed with formula and levy from the board authority, and Lakeview is zero. And so, I do think the board has done a great job of being efficient, and not just this board, but previous boards, and spending tax dollars wisely. And so, I think one thing you'll notice is, like I said, we're not on the ballot every year with an operating levy or a bond levy, but we do think we have a vision, a plan, to address things for at least 20 years going out, for not only what on the 2002 portion of the building, but also for outdoor spaces. So.
Oh.
Yep.
Got a question here. Explain the difference in maintenance cost per year for turf versus grass field. This is from Sean Myers.
Yeah, so a question with maintenance costs, so some of the things that the district spends, like with the grass surfaces. You know, obviously, water would be, we figured conservatively in our cost projections, right around $6,000 a year for our watering costs. You know, field paint and things like that, that's done multiple times in the fall. That would be around a similar cost to that. And then your hourly labor for doing that, for mowing, and then your chemical costs for fertilizer. So you're not going to have that obviously with the turf. So you will be some savings there. But like I said, primarily the main thing, you know, the thought behind that is the almost increasing your usage by about 5 times as often as that space is used now. So good question. Anything else? Again, shoot me an email if you think of anything, have any questions, and I can get you contacted with Greg or Jim or Dan or Preston, and we will certainly work to get your questions answered. We're having another session Sunday night at 7 o'clock with the same format. So if you do think of something then, feel free to join us again. And again, thank you for taking the time to join and learn more about the proposal. And